Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Back Shed. It is Monday, August 30th, 2021. This is episode number 70, and it is my privilege. You're in for a great treat today. It is my privilege to welcome to the Back Shed my friend Brent Lamb. Brent, it's good to have you in my shed with me this morning.
Good to hear. Good to be here, buddy.
Oh, man, it's so fun to see you. It's been years since we've gotten to talk and gotten to see each other, and I thought today, being the release of the Brent Lamb podcast, the perfect opportunity to have you on here and talk a little bit about life and growing up in Nashville and all those kinds of good things. So yeah, it's fun to have you here. I want to give a special welcome to those already joining on. Kathy, good to see you. Donna, good to see you here. Always a pleasure to have you on board. So Brent, yesterday in church, as I was giving a little teaser for people about you coming on, I think I may have committed a cardinal sin for a pastor to do. And it's either lying or embellishing, one or the other. But I think I told people that you're a Grammy award-winning musician.
It's close. I sang lead for a Grammy award-winning country group.
All right. There we go. So that was Shenandoah, correct?
Yeah, Shenandoah. I never got one personally, but yes, there are 3 Grammys. Yes.
Oh, 3. They had 3 Grammys. Now, when I was in your house years ago, you had looked like a gold record on your wall or something like that. Is that true?
Oh yeah, there's 5 of those.
And what does that mean?
That means 500,000 people bought a copy of that album. So there's 5 of those. So
all right, we'll talk a little bit about those. That's a teaser for you all. So we'll let you all find out here in a few minutes where those came from and all of that. But Brent, I thought it would be fun. You grew up in Nashville and ended up in the music, or do they call it the industry? Is that what it's called out there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So tell us about growing up in Nashville, what your family coming to Christ, getting into the industry. Give us a little context to who you are.
Wow.
Here.
Okay. Well, I'm 61 years old now, so that we'll do the short version for sure. Yeah, I was born and raised in Nashville, and so when you're from there, you know the main industry is music, and it can be. I mean, you have the Christian music industries there, the country music's there. It's actually a big jazz town, which a lot of people don't know, because we're 3 hours from Memphis, when that's a huge jazz town. There's a lot of genres that happen there. So it wasn't so much that I grew up around music being in Nashville as much it was my family.
Got it.
So yeah, my dad sang in gospel quartets. My mom sang. One of my granddads played bluegrass music professionally. It was just there. I mean, and so, my childhood memories are, we would go to church on Sunday, we would go to Granny and Papa's, and we would eat, and then we would sing and play music until dark, and we went home. And it was like the normal thing to do. I always compare it to, if you come from a military family, you graduate high school and you join the military because that's what your father and your grandfather, or if you played sports, if you're an athletic family, which obviously I'm not, it's like, yeah, you just that is the most natural thing to you. So when I came up through elementary, I knew how to sing. I knew how to sing harmonies. By the first grade, I was singing any harmony part you wanted to sing. And then I grew up, in the late 60s, and then rock music, the Beatles had come, and then the rock music scene, I started looking at that. And then by 13, 14, I was playing guitar. I was writing my own songs. I never knew I couldn't do it.
That's and I can't even imagine that kind of thing. I mean, I'm the kind of person that my friend said, "Hey, you should sing tenor, 10 or 12 miles away."
Yes. Yeah, I just did it. And then by senior year of high school, my life's dream was to be an architect, and I got called to ministry. So I didn't tell anybody. And my dad and mom went to a new grocery store to check out a new grocery store. And when they walked in, I don't think they do it now, but you know, when you're 61, you remember the 60s, and it's like they have the bulletin board on the right inside the
Oh
grocery,
yeah, yeah.
boats for sale, puppies for sale, and those kind of things. And you tear off the phone number and call it if you're interested. It said Christian rock band needs lead singer. And my dad tore it off, and he came home and he said, "You should call this number." And I was like, "What is it?" And he said, it's a Christian music band that needs a lead singer, and maybe that's for you. And I was like, "No, I want to be an architect and go to college." And he goes, "Well, maybe God doesn't want you to do that right now." So I start crying. I knew I'm called.
Wait,
And so,
so you're telling me, let me get this right. You're telling me that a parent, your dad told you you should go into music rather than get a stable career in architecture.
yeah. So, yeah. So, you know, for anyone listening, you can't run from someone that is everywhere. And so that's what I was trying to
Yeah.
call to ministry. But when your dad says, "Don't go to college, join a rock band," you know God's got your number.
Right. Like that is like the direct voice of God right there
Yeah.
manifesting through your father.
The tears came, and I was like, "Dad, that's not what I want to do, but I feel like that's what the Lord wants me to do, but I want to be an architect." And so, long and short of it, I got on a tour bus in 1978, and I got off that tour bus in 2003.
Yes, you did.
So, I've
Yeah.
never been to college. I have a 12th grade education. I married my love of my life and met her in 1980, and married her in 1983, my wife Laurie. And our first child was born, and he brought a friend with him. And so we have twin boys. And then 4 years later, after they were born, God gave us a little girl, which we always say we love her the most because she came by herself. And they're all adults, married adults with their own kids. And so,
And you got lots of stories about them. Hopefully we can get to a little bit of that. Now Brent, you're yeah, so you went through, you say you got off the tour bus in 2003. So what are a couple of highlights over that time?
oh gosh, well, I wrote, well, you know, I was starting to write songs professionally when I met Laurie in 1980. We got married in 83. She said, "I want you to write me my song and sing it to me as me and my dad come down the aisle." So
There's no way I could do that.
I forgot about it. And after the rehearsal dinner, all my groomsmen took me out for the party for guys, and so we actually went and played putt golf because we were new Christians. We didn't know what else to do. So we go play putt, and one of them asked me, said, "Hey, did you get your song written for Laurie for tomorrow for the wedding?" I was like, "Oh my gosh." So I ran home and I really put my heart into it. And about 10 minutes later, I had this song, and I sang it to her the next day. And the song is called "Household of Faith,"
Oh, I love that song.
which became a huge
Yeah.
yeah. So I sang it to her the next day at our wedding and thought that song will go away and no one will ever hear it. 2 years later, in '85, a Christian artist named Steve Green recorded it, and hence one of the gold records on my wall is his album "God and God Alone."
Yeah.
And it bought,
I got goosebumps here just hearing you talk about this right now.
yeah, we were able to buy a home with that because he sold a lot of records.
You
And
sold a lot of those for sure.
yeah. So then I guess the next one was I met this guy at the publishing company, record company, I was putting a band together, and I had the whole band except the keyboard player. And, 80s Christian music was heavy synth. And so I needed a real keyboard player. And this kid come up and he said, I want to audition for your band. And so I auditioned him, and he was not very good. And so his name was Stephen Curtis Chapman. And so I asked him, I said, Stephen, are you a keyboard player? And he kind of hung his head, and he's like, no, I'm a guitar player. And so we still joke about that I didn't hire Stephen Curtis Chapman before he was Stephen Curtis Chapman. So yeah, but we became friends. And
Yeah.
so I wrote with him, his first number one was My Turn Now.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote that, and then I wrote a song on the Great Adventure album and did all the harmonies and all that stuff for the Great Adventure, and a couple of other stuff. So I have other gold records from his. So yeah, I tried to steward what God put in my lap, try to steward that faithfully, and God's really blessed me with I've had a few songs, not a lot of songs, but the songs I've had have done really well. They've gone really big. And
your songs, and I think we're gonna push in a few minutes here. We're gonna push your podcast, because I really want people to listen to this, because it's like I said, I wrote my review of your podcast today, and it just said, I feel like I'm sitting in the family room with Brent, getting, hearing stories of life, right? And but your songs tell lots of stories. How did you come about that? What where you said, I'm just going to start to tell story through my songs?
yeah, I've just kind of took the approach. I've always said, I don't really want to write something that I don't know about or that I haven't lived.
Yeah.
My approach to songwriting has always been write what you know, like write what you've experienced. And that served me well. And so that kind of turns into story songs, and it being me being from Nashville, kind of country and folky, and that's kind of who I am. And so it just kind of naturally happened. But that's where the stories come from. Some of them are real stories, blatant real, and then others are like, well, this is kind of what happened, but if I put this in it, it'll make it a little more interesting.
Right. Okay. So you've written some songs. You obviously wrote Household of Faith for Lori for your wedding, but you've written songs for your kids too.
Yeah, well, anyone that has children, I mean, it gets real really fast.
Yeah.
When they show up in groups. So um yeah, and we love the Lord, and we were just this young couple trying to make it. And Laurie was working the first 2 years to support me, and I signed a record deal, which means no money, a lot of work, no money, because you're just trying to build your fan base. And so I'm working part times and stuff. And then 2 years in, we have twin boys, and they were born 8 weeks early with hearts in their heart problems and lung problems. And so we really grew up fast.
Yeah.
And so songs came. I wrote one in probably 88 that the first line is, my little boys are 3 years old and they already walk like their dad. And so the whole gist of the song was wanting to talk like, wanting to live like Jesus, like we want, because that was my prayer when the boys were born, and the doctor was saying, we don't know if they're going to make it or not. And so I just remember telling the Lord, if you let me keep them, I promise I will teach them to walk and talk and act like Jesus. And if you take them to be with you, then I will trust you in that, and we will never talk about this again. And so yeah, a lot of the songs were written in those seasons of either heartache or tragedy or question or really exciting stuff. Some of them were written about my granddad or my dad, and so obviously I have songs about my mom, my dad, my wife, my children. I've got a couple that I'm working on about the grandchildren.
So you got 5 grandchildren now.
5 grand.
Which blows me away because you are not that much. You're 9 years older than me.
Yeah.
I have a high schooler now, as of
Oh, remember those days?
few
Woo.
weeks ago, and I have a 3-year-old, so God bless me. But and a couple in between there. But Brent, I don't know how to segue this or transition this, but I feel like you have, even in my own life, you've been somebody that has helped other people walk through life. When we had a chance to interact together for a couple of years, you were known in our circles as Papa.
Yeah.
You were Papa to a lot of people, and how did that role come on? Where you really took a lot of people around your arms and said, "Here, come on, let's do life together. Let's let me show you how to live through this. Let me just walk with you through these times."
Yeah, I think that really took off about the time I turned 40.
Okay.
I started realizing, oh gosh, if I get 80 years, my life's half over. And I had a lot of success and stuff in the music business, but I think every man starts wondering, have I done anything that matters? And then I think the second question is, what am I leaving?
Right.
Not not inheritance,
But legacy.
children and grandchildren.
Yeah.
It's what am I leaving to the body of Christ? And so, we're in Nashville. I'm an artist. I sing lead for a Grammy award-winning country group. I own a studio. I own my own publishing, and we go to a large church. So a lot of people, knew who I was or said, and so all these young artists and writers are moving to Nashville to make it, and they either have a plan and it's dumb, or they don't have a plan at all. And so church people and people that knew me would say, you really need to talk to Brent, and so and then all of my pastors had been saying since I was in my 30s, you're a pastor, man.
Yep.
You have a pastor's heart.
Absolutely.
I'm a songwriter. Like, nope, you're a pastor. And so I started meeting at Starbucks with these kids. They say, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? I just moved to Nashville and I want to be in the music business, and I don't know anybody and I don't know anything. So can I buy you a cup of coffee? I said, sure. All right, be at this Starbucks at 6 a.m. and we'll talk. Well, then it got to where at 12 noon, I was still sitting there. So I would meet with this person from 6 to 7. I would meet with this person from 7 to 8, and this person 8 to 9, and 9, all the way up. So we just decided I can't keep doing that because I'm touring and I have a business. And so what we started doing, Laurie loves to have people in, and she's like, what if we just invited people out? Come to our house, we'll feed them because they're all starving. They're all eating ramen noodles. And so I said, okay. So we just started putting the word out. If you want to hang out at the Lambs on a Tuesday night, just come. Here's the address. And so we started doing that. And sometimes we would have 2 or 3, and sometimes we'd have 10 or 12 or 20. And I would just say, bring 2 questions. And so I just began doing that, and I fell in love with it.
Oh, yeah.
Gosh. But they were calling me Mr. Lamb. And I was like, that's
my dad.
Very offensive. That's my dad. He's not here. So, and then my kids have always called me Pops, if they were angry with me, it's Dad, but most time it's Pops. It's still Pops.
Yeah.
So we just became Papa Lamb and Mama Lamb.
Yep.
And that kind of just caught on as we moved to California, and that's where we met you guys. And
yeah, well, and I remember in our time together, it was very common for young people, these guys in their 20s that
right.
we were up at Hume Lake, obviously, but they would just, when they would talk about you, they would just talk about you as Papa. And yeah. I knew that was Brent, or Brent and Laurie. So and you guys had indirectly and directly a great influence on April and me. I mean, you were around as we were dating and getting married, and and walked with us through the loss of our daughter. Even, you played in her service, and
Right.
were just super impactful in our lives. And I remember for us, we often look back and say, we want to be like Brent and Lori for these younger kids coming up.
It's the greatest gift I think God's ever given us, because we're in church ministry. I'm a worship pastor at this mega church of 200, but yeah, we love having these relationships now.
Yeah.
Over the last 30 years that we've poured into people.
Yeah.
And we've taught them how to get married. Either say, this is what we did right, this is what we did wrong. Learn from both. Like, this is what you're going to have to be if you want to be married. And then people thinking about married is like, don't do it if you don't have to. Like, because it's, we've always said marriage exposes how selfish you are, and children confirm it.
Yep. At 100%. April and I always talked about it. It's like, I learned how selfish I was by getting married, and we learned how selfish we were together by having kids.
Exactly.
Yeah. What happens? What do you learn when you have grandkids?
You know why they're called grand? Because they are grand. And it's so funny. I think one of the main things I've learned about being a grandfather is you get to sit all the way back in the chair, and you get to watch the show for free. Because like parents, they sit on the edge of the chair because you're going to have to get up.
You never know when. Yep.
Grandparents, you don't. You sit all the way back and you just watch the show for free. You go, your mom's coming. Here comes your mom. You better run.
And you don't have to keep them at night.
Yeah. They go home, and yeah, it's great. It's great.
I keep saying, well, talk with me about this. We didn't talk about this ahead of time, but with our youngest, like I said, we have a 3-year-old little girl we adopted from China here about 2 years ago, and she's just an absolute joy, and absolutely hard in life, and especially at this stage, and especially having a 3-year-old being 52 is a whole different game. Let me tell you. That's when I'm like, all my friends are now sitting back on the easy chair, and I'm on the edge, but then you fall off the chair. Oh, okay. So I lost my thought. It just kind of ran away. But I was thinking about this, and April and I were talking about it yesterday. Is it's so easy to live in the future, and it's so easy to look forward to who our kids are going to become someday, and especially when you have parents, and there will be some that are watching of younger children, and I just can't wait. Often I just can't wait for her to be in that next stage of life and kind of enjoy her in that life. So I'm going to tolerate this season rather than embrace it to the full extent of what it is. Like, I'll never get this season back with her. So, I mean, have you ever experienced that in life, Papa?
Yeah, man. Yeah. And you use the correct word, season. These are seasons. And you think, oh my gosh, if they could just sleep all night.
Right.
Which would mean I could sleep all night. And then it moves into, oh gosh, the diaper, like if they could just clean themselves. And then it moves, and you think, oh gosh, and then it gets into, if they could feed themselves, and then they can do all that. And it's like, oh, well, that doesn't seem as hard as it seemed it was when I was in it. Right. And then in the junior high, it's like, if they could just drive themselves, PDS, pre-drive syndrome, if we could just, Dad, take me here. Could you pick us up here? Could you
Yeah.
So-and-so dad's going to pick us up. So-and-so's mom. And it's like, if they could just, and then they get their license, and then they can drive. And then you sit and wonder, are they okay? Why are they not calling? And I mean, I look back on it now, and, my kids are in their 30s, and they're seasons, and you miss, once you get through one, you begin to miss it. It's like, oh man.
Right. You don't get it back.
Yeah. Teach them how to walk, teaching them how to use a fork or spoon. It's like, oh man, teach them how to drink out of a straw. It's like, you miss those times, So with grandkids, you kind of get to relive that a little bit, but you don't have all the responsibility. You can pass them off to the parent and say, we're going to go home where there's no one else.
Yeah. Which I do look forward to that one of these days. I got to be honest, but for now, we're going to enjoy this. We're going to embrace it to the fullest extent.
Absolutely. You know, that's why my music career never was that big, because my foundational thought was, me and my wife are going to grow old together one time.
Mm.
And my children are going to grow up one time. I'm not missing that for the music industry or any other industry. I'm not going to be on the road 5-6 days a week all year and,
Yeah.
you know, and hear stories about soccer games. And I'm not going to do that.
Okay. So walk me through that for a second. And, oh, by the way, Cam Smith, good old Cam is watching today. He says hello. Hi, Cam. But when you and Lori came to Hume Lake, you moved to Hume Lake, I think in 2003, 2, somewhere in there.
No, it was January of 05.
Oh, God bless you.
Yeah.
You came in January to Hume Lake.
Yep. 2000.
In the snow, probably.
Snow.
Yeah.
And fall.
But I remember all of us up there said, Brent Lamb's coming to Hume. Brent's leaving his big time Nashville music career. I mean, this guy goes fishing with Stephen Curtis Chapman and writes songs, and you know, all of that. Like, how did you leave all of that to come into the role you had there, and then ultimately into a way more, and ultimately to becoming a pastor?
Well, remember this phrase, Cliff.
Okay.
It's only glamorous if you're not doing it.
Mm.
So remember that phrase.
Yeah.
And you can apply that.
I may put that in the show notes for those who follow on later.
Yeah, it's only glamorous if you're not doing it. And what that means is it's hard work. It's really hard work to balance traveling and touring and being a husband and being a father and having a mortgage and having, you know, having to mow your lawn, and it's hard. It's hard to keep balance. And so it's doable. You can do it. But, you know, like I said, I left Shenandoah in 2003 because I was missing ministry, and Hume Lake was one of those places that we had been coming. I came to Hume the first time, I think in 1990
and you tell a great story about that in episode 1 of your podcast. So I will reserve this story for people to, this is putting out dangling a carrot for you all to subscribe and listen to the podcast, because it's a fun story.
But here's the thing about Hume and how we ended up there. When you're on stage, people think you're somebody,
right?
Okay, you obviously have credentials and you have skill, and so that's why you're up there. But in our culture, people think he's a star or she's a star, and the truth is you're not. You're just a regular person that's living a regular life, but it just happens to be very visible to the public.
Yeah.
And so Hume was one of those people that would book Brent Lamb, but when we got there, they loved Brent.
Right.
And the staff and everybody treated us as Brent and Laurie, not the guy that, you know, and that's very attractive to anybody that's on the stage.
Well, and it does say something. There is something to be said, Brent, for you, in that it was very clear, and having worked at Hume over the years and having been that guy that booked people like you to come, there are people that kind of get jaded in that career and or start to believe the hype about them and so on. But you were, when we're hanging out, you know, over in the Ponderosa Lodge telling stories late at night, and who you are on the stage and who you are in your house, you're the same person.
Yeah.
Like there's no difference.
Important. And the way you do that is to surround yourself with people that love you more than they love what you do.
Hmm.
And that keeps you grounded.
You are dropping all these quotes today.
Yep.
I'm writing this down.
My wife and children, they call them Brentisms.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, they, it's, if you have people that love you for who you are more than what you do,
Yeah.
that's who you want to surround yourself with, because staff are being paid to
Yep.
make you feel good, and they encourage you, but you got to have those people. And what I did, luckily, and I had a mentor that taught me this. You need at least one or two 2 a.m. friends.
Yeah.
That are not impressed with Brent Lamb, but they
Right.
love. And so I had guys that I met with breakfast every Thursday at 7 a.m. And we sat down and said, okay, what's important to us right now, that if your career takes off, you still want these things as priorities.
Yeah.
And so it was my walk with the Lord, my marriage to Laurie, and my kids. And so they said, all right, how are we going to do this? Like, I want to date my wife once a week, and I want to date my daughter once a week, even if she's 3. And then I want to kick the soccer ball with the boys, or go shoot firearms, or go fishing, or whatever we do. And so every Thursday morning at breakfast, they would say, how many dates you been on this week? And if I'd been doing sessions, recording, or doing all this stuff, they say, well, when is bus calls? Like, I'm leaving tonight at midnight to go do Friday, Saturday night shows. They say, okay, we're going to call you at 10, and you have better been, you better have been on 2 dates. And so they held me accountable.
That's fantastic.
And so you can't lie when you're sitting in a booth at a restaurant. You can hide in a Bible study. You can hide in a church congregation, but you can't hide when it's just you and a guy, and he's like, how you doing? Well, I'm doing really good. Well, why is your wife calling my wife?
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, I'm lying. So, and now that, my mentors taught me that. And then as I mentor young guys here at the church, that's what I'm teaching them. You got to get honest. You got to be upfront with who you are, what's going on, or you don't get better.
Yeah.
You get better at it.
It is just powerful. I really appreciate it. And this reminds me, I mean, my 2 of my best friends are Jay Johnson and Rich Ferreira, and we have those kinds of friendships, and that exact thing happens is our wives all converse. And so, like, I know if he's not doing well through
exactly.
Oh, well, okay. So we're not going to drag this on too long today, Brent, but tell us about the podcast. I want people to get to know Brent. I want them to get to know Haley. I didn't realize that Haley Baby Girl was going to be a prime suspect on this podcast. And it's so fun. Like, I'm already completely sold on it. Just in my drive to work this morning. So tell us about the podcast. How did it come about? What's the intent and allure to it for someone?
Well, it started when I began to listen to podcasts and thought, man, this is, in my age group, we would call that a radio show, talk radio show, but I know it's called podcast. I'm being educated very quickly. So Haley started, she's like, Dad, you're not touring. And she said, my history of my life is your music and stuff, but we always had people in our home, even at Hume. And then even after Hume, it's like people, we would sit around and tell stories. And now that my kids are adults and they have their own children, when we get together for holidays, they still want, like, oh, you tell the story about so-and-so. And, and it's all, we always laugh. We've always said, if you don't learn to laugh, you won't make it. I mean, life is hard for all of us. And so she said that, my memories of growing up, she said, we should offer that to everyone. We can't, everyone can't come to Texas and sit around on our back porch or our kitchen table. So why don't we just offer that and say, hey, here's a half hour or less. You sit around and telling stories. And I said, okay. So we started it, and so today's the launch day. We're August 30th. It's the launch day.
I was so grateful that you were willing to be here with me on launch day. Like that's, I feel kind of Hollywood here. I don't know.
Cliff, man, it's Cliff.
Oh man, Brent, I want to tell everyone you got to do it. Go onto iTunes or Apple. I don't know what it's called, Apple Podcasts, and search Brent Lamb podcast.
The Brent Lamb podcast.
Brent Lamb podcast. You can follow along on Instagram and Twitter probably, and all those kinds of things. And Haley, your daughter, who is amazing. We I think we still share Christmas cards with her and Josh. So but and she's been a great friend of my wife's, April's, and so we just had the privilege of having all of you guys in our lives. So it's fun. I think the thing I would say, and like I said, I wrote it in my review of your podcast, Brent, but I feel like you just get to sit in the family room with the Lambs and tell stories. And oh, let's go back to the title of today's episode. Brent, what is it?
True Stories I Made Up.
True Stories I Made Up, right?
Yeah, there is an art to telling stories, and so that kind of happened. I was recording music, and I would come to places and do concerts, and then in between songs I would tell stories. So we had people started coming to the merch table, go, "Do you have all the stories? We want the stories." I was like, "No, those are just family stories, So we ended up doing a comedy record of just the stories, and so we were thinking about a title, and it's like, how about True Stories I Made Up? And like, yes, that's it. So that's how we got that.
So that's what I named the title of today's episode here, True Stories I Made Up. And I hope you all have enjoyed our time with Brent. And I hope you will subscribe to his podcast. I hope, if you have not already, that you've subscribed to the Back Shed, or follow along on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you get podcasts, all those good things. Brent, let me pray for you for a second here as we close it off. Father, I am so grateful for Brent and Lori, Hunter, Hayden, Haley, just their lives and how you have used them in thousands of people's lives, Lord, to show the love of Christ, to encourage, to exhort. Thank you for just the deep love that Brent has shown to me and April. And God, would you please continue to use them in this season of being grandparents, and Lord, as this podcast happens, just being a storyteller. Would you just be honored through it all? In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother.
Brent, thank you so much for being a part of this. It is an absolute joy and privilege to have you here and to have you being willing to join me in the shed.
I could say I've been in the shed now.
Been in the shed. I contemplated calling the title of this, or of this podcast, Lessons from the Back Shed, which I thought was really effective. But then so many people are like, well, that's where your dad used to take you behind. And, I'm like, well,
this is not my first trip to the shed.
Right. Exactly. But hey, everyone, thanks for joining us today. We will see you next week right back here, 10 o'clock on Monday mornings, or on the later version on YouTube and podcast. We'll see you later. Have a great day.